Good afternoon and welcome to this seminar, Nutrition Education for a Healthy Workplace. Today's topic is metabolic syndrome. My name is Frank Fitzpatrick and I'm currently enrolled at the University of New England's College of Graduate and Professional Studies, working towards a master's in applied nutrition. I have one special interest to disclose. I was diagnosed with metabolic syndrome in 2017, and not in the beginning stages of the syndrome. I was told I had type 2 diabetes. I currently control it with diet and exercise. I follow a whole food, low carb diet with some intermittent fasting. I've lost 50 pounds and currently have no markers for metabolic syndrome, all without medications. It's really not difficult once you understand both the disease and its causes. I would like to help others to avoid similar health issues by educating people about nutrition, so I figured I would start to study the subject formally. So today's agenda, we'll have a presentation on metabolic syndrome. In it we'll describe metabolic syndrome, the reasons for the current epidemic, eating patterns to prevent and reverse metabolic syndrome, discuss workplace barriers and facilitators for employee wellness. We'll have some question and answer time. After that, it'll be open discussion on the topics from the presentation. After that, we'll break up to workshop 1. This is how to evaluate nutrition. Hopefully you've all brought your 24-hour food journals. It's okay if you haven't. I have 2 filled out already that we can use. In this we will learn how to analyze our food logs using a program called Cronometer. After that we'll break up into workplace number 2, and in that it'll be on workplace wellness in that workshop. We will discuss existing barriers at your current workplace. We'll also discuss and propose changes which could improve the workplace. And at the end of this, we'll have an evaluation period for you to complete forms. This will give me important feedback on how to improve this education program. So what is metabolic syndrome? First off, you cannot solve a problem without knowing what the problem is. How many of you have heard of the term metabolic syndrome? Most people do not even know what it is. When my doctor told me I had metabolic syndrome in 2017, I had never heard the term. Now, the National Institute of Health says we have a global epidemic of metabolic syndrome. I find that very interesting. If it is so prevalent, why don't we know about it? And how can we have a fighting chance to avoid this if we are completely unaware of the conditions and its causes? So this is not some new term or the latest internet diagnosis. The syndrome was first described in 1920 by a Swedish doctor named Eskil Kylin. They called it Syndrome X. The term metabolic syndrome was first used in the 50s and became commonly used in the 1970s. So a diagnosis for metabolic syndrome is 3 or more of these markers below. First one is abdominal obesity with a waist circumference greater than 40 inches for men or 35 inches for women. This is not BMI or obesity we're talking about here, it's waist circumference. This is an important distinction because the visceral fat is what is the issue. It is the fat around your organs, including your liver. You can be normal weight and have metabolic syndrome. When I was diagnosed, I had a 42-inch waist and skinny arms and legs. This is one of the indicators that we often do not measure. Has your doctor ever measured you for waist circumference? Probably not. So we're great at measuring the other 4, but some would argue that this is the most dangerous one of them all. Now, hypertension is a blood pressure greater than 130 over 85 or medications to control it. Most people are very familiar with this one. We get this every time we go to the doctor. And I think most of you are probably familiar with or even know what your blood pressure is. Hyperglycemia, this is a fasting blood glucose greater than 100 milligrams per deciliter, or medications to control it, like diabetes medications. So a high fasting blood sugar over 100 is sometimes referred to as prediabetes. It's an easy test and gives you an indication of your insulin resistance, and that's a term to remember, insulin resistance. This is what we're concerned about here. It's how your body is responding to your insulin. So insulin is a hormone that regulates sugar in your blood. So if you have a impaired insulin response or insulin resistance, what will happen is your blood sugar will slowly rise and rise over time, and the more impaired it is, the higher your blood sugar will be. Mine was 420 when I first got told about it, but the interesting thing about it was when I went back and I looked at history of my tests, I had been over 100 for many, many years. And no one ever said, like, hey, you know, you got an issue here that you should be careful about. So this is a very good early warning sign that there's something wrong and it's time to change. If you modify your lifestyle when you have slightly elevated blood glucose, it is so much easier to control. We'll talk about this more later. The third one is high triglycerides above 150. This is standard blood test you probably get. It's in a lipid profile. This is a type of fat in your blood. Now keep in mind, this is driven by refined carbohydrates, not by eating fats. The carbohydrates or the sugars are converted to triglycerides in your blood. The last one is cholesterol level. This is with an HDL cholesterol less than 40 milligrams per deciliter in men or 50 milligrams per deciliter in women, or medication to control it. And this one's often called the good cholesterol. It's the one that you want high. This is another common test. Most people probably got it. And it's a very good indicator of your cardiovascular risk or risk of getting a heart attack. Your diet can modify this, but sometimes it's very controlled by genetics, and we're sometimes always stuck with the genetics we have. So why should I worry about metabolic syndrome? Well, let's look at the list here. These are the diseases associated with metabolic syndrome: heart disease, diabetes, cancer, high blood pressure, dementia. These are the biggest health problems facing our population. Now, I would add non-alcoholic fatty liver disease to the list, but many people don't know what this is. But 20 to 30% of the population have this, and it is dangerous, and it can lead to liver failure. So, the prevalence of metabolic syndrome increases with age, and it takes many, many years of unhealthy lifestyle to develop this. From 7% of the people aged 20 to 29 to 44% of those aged 60 to 69. Almost half the people over 60 have this syndrome, so those aren't really good odds. The global cost, including healthcare and loss of economic activity, is in the trillions of dollars. And this current trend is really unsustainable unless some magic bullet or pill is discovered, which is unlikely, or we make concerted efforts towards change in lifestyle, which is the root cause of the disease. So there's no real drug for metabolic syndrome. We have many drugs for the symptoms, all those ones we listed up there. But the problem is the disease continues to progress, and but it really does respond very well to diet changes. So, what has changed? So the increase in metabolic syndrome started in the 70s and has reached epidemic levels according to both the National Institute of Health and the World Health Organization. There's not been any real change in human beings during this time. We are all still genetically and physically the same. You know, we have the same willpower we used to have. There's not been any great mutation. So if you think about it, people are identical now as they were 50 years ago. So what is different? The environment is very different. So during this time, the number of food stores has decreased by 15%. These are places where people go to buy whole foods. And the ready-made food places has doubled. And people are eating much, much more processed foods. Another big change is food advertisement. This is a huge business. Studies have shown that the brain secretes dopamine in response to a variety of stimuli, including images of food. And look at these budgets. $3.5 billion a year on fast food advertisement. $785 million a year for the top 5 soda brands. They wouldn't be spending this much money if they didn't work. The other day I was watching a football game with my son, and he's been trying to eat better. And the Jersey Mike's ad kept coming up, showing their subs over and over and over again. And I'll tell you, they are good subs. But the next day he was complaining to me that he had gone over his daily limit. It was only lunchtime. And then I said, what happened, And he goes, well, I had a large Jersey Mike sub. So I'm telling you, these ads work.